everyone, my name is Hannah Daly, and this is my discussion board post for our final discussion board. So, as far as the two main required questions, the first one being, what is something that you were really enjoyed or you were surprised to learn about myself academically or just in general? I was actually really surprised about how much I enjoyed planning out my future classroom, and then in another aspect, I enjoyed the challenge of coming up with engaging activities for my future students. I did find that I spent a lot of time kind of pondering over whether or not an activity would be fun or engaging, maybe a little bit too much time in retrospect, but honestly, it was just a really fun, challenging thing to be able to do, to sit there and think of, okay, does this accomplish what I'm trying to teach my students? But then also, is this something that they're going to be engaged in and that they have the potential to remember even once they leave my classroom? So I really enjoyed that aspect, which I was kind of surprised about, because that can be one of the more challenging aspects of lesson planning, is finding something that's both academically rigorous but then also enjoyable for students. I was also surprised to find out how much I enjoyed working in partnerships. I had an awesome partner that I worked with for the majority of this summer session, and before this I've always really dreaded group assignments. It just always ends up being kind of a uneven balance of who does the work, who plans it, and you just always feel like you're getting left out or you're getting burned in the process of someone else taking credit for your work, or you're doing too much and they're not doing enough. But I found out how much I really enjoyed working with someone who is as motivated and excited about the work as I am, and the more I thought about it, the more I was like, wow, this is going to end up being my profession. As I get deeper into the education department, these assignments, I'm going to have more and more chances and opportunities to collaborate with people. But I think the difference is that in education, that collaboration is expected and welcomed, and people know that that's part of teaching, and so people are more invested in that opportunity. So I was really surprised to find out how much I enjoyed that group work. And then as far as what I would consider a highlight of this course, one of the biggest highlights was realizing that I'm more competent at lesson planning and with objectives than I thought I was. Those have always been two aspects of teaching that I've always been very nervous about. The learning objectives just always seemed like they were so big and they covered so much. So how do you make sure you cover all the components? I would always get scared about, what does timely mean? Do I need to have my students accomplishing this standard in, a week or 2 weeks or 3 days? What do you mean by timely? And so they just seemed like there's so many components going into them, and I wasn't sure if I was actually doing them correctly. But, as we've read through this class and we put what we've learned into action, I've realized that I'm a lot better at them than I believed I was. And same thing with lessons. Lessons, I never knew if the activities that I were creating were, not academically rigorous enough, or if they were too engaging and didn't have enough concept embedded in them. And I've found that, I have a pretty good balance as far as making the lessons that I have very well thought out and having the content that needs to be in there, but that also are engaging for students to participate in. So that was awesome. And then I also really enjoyed that the progression of the assignments throughout this course, how it was really interesting just to kind of see the full circle. So, we started out kind of creating the philosophy for our classrooms through the rules and procedures, and figuring out how we wanted to set up our classroom to reflect those rules and procedures. And then we got to, implement and all the aspects of a lesson plan, starting with activities and standards, then moving towards the materials that we're going to be using within those lessons and the actual lesson. And we're about to advance towards the final part, which is the actual teaching. So I really enjoyed kind of seeing the full spectrum of lesson planning, and also kind of getting a feel for how much work goes into a lesson plan. It's not so much just the actual planning out of the lesson, but you also have to be prepared as far as the materials goes as well. So that was really one of my probably favorite parts, is just the progression of the actual course. And then for my choice questions, I decided to do the one about why reflection is important in lesson planning. I decided to do this one because I always used to tend to be someone who was not very big on reflection. I didn't understand the importance, and I didn't understand why it was necessary. But I've definitely, through the education courses that I've participated in, have come to see the real merit in reflection. Reflection is important because it gives you a chance to think about what went well, what worked, what didn't, what needs to change, and gives you room for improvement, because not everything's going to go perfectly. And so it gives you kind of a foundation for, okay, what can I change or alter to make it go better next time, so that you can be even more prepared. But then I think it also makes you think about how to make the material more accessible to students, because sometimes a well thought out lesson plan works on paper, but then depending on your class, it can be a big flop. And it's not because it's a bad lesson plan, it's just because it doesn't work for your students. And sometimes you just have to go with it and be like, okay, it just didn't work. What do we do next? And so I think it does give a good idea for teachers, as far as reflection, to think about, like, how do my students best learn? Because you learn even from the flops. If you have a lesson that goes over really badly, you're like, well, guess my students don't do well with guide instruction PowerPoints. Maybe we need to be doing more anchor charts. They seem to really respond to that. And so you learn more about your students and how your class operates through reflection as well. And then I also responded to what was one assignment from this class that I hope to use in my future career. And so honestly, all the assignments that we did could be applicable to my future career, depending on what grade I get placed in for my first job, because a lot of them were made for second grade, and so if I get placed in second grade, then this would be, a little lighter load on my shoulders for having some stuff already planned out. But then again, they could also potentially work for other grades with some alterations. But the one assignment that I definitely think will be applicable is the classroom design and management plan that we created, because that really started to help get me thinking about what materials I can start looking for now for my future classroom to help get that setup that I really want. But then it also got me thinking about, how do I create rules that reflect how I want my classroom to be run in the environment that I want to create. And so, it really kind of helped spark a self-discussion, I guess, about, what my teaching pedagogy is and how I want that pedagogy to be reflected in my actual classroom. But that's my discussion board. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will can't wait to read yours.